Visual clutter doesn't just look bad. Princeton neuroscientists found it acts like 1,000 open browser tabs, constantly competing for your attention and draining your cognitive capacity. When you walk through the front door after a brutal day and start scrubbing the kitchen counter, you aren't just doing a chore. You might literally be fighting the fundamental physics of the universe to create a localized pocket of absolute order. The modern professional exists in a state of perpetual high-entropy overload. The shifting economy, unpredictable algorithms, the looming anxiety of artificial intelligence, the relentless cascade of emails. These are massive systems outside your control. You are a single point of consciousness navigating a storm of variables, processing threats you cannot physically touch. We call it hustle culture, but really, we might just be trying to outrun the chaos. It is Tuesday evening. You drop your keys on the entryway table. There is a sharp tightness at the base of your neck. You notice the mail piling up, shoes scattered across the floor, dishes stacked unevenly in the sink. You notice the tightness briefly before the next thought arrives. You do not name it. You just reach for the sponge. What happens if you leave the sponge alone? A messy room is not a moral failure. It is simply physical entropy bleeding into your domestic space. The universe dictates that physical matter trends toward destruction. It is the second law of thermodynamics. The arrow of time moves in one direction, dragging systems into disorder. When overwhelmed by unpredictable macroeconomic forces, that clutter feels like an active threat. It is outside chaos infiltrating the one place you are supposed to be safe. You cannot fix the housing market, but you can force the geometry of your spice rack into perfect alignment. To survive this dread, the brain adopts an advanced defense strategy. Theoretical physics has a concept called Maxwell's demon. It is an entity controlling a microscopic door, selectively separating fast, hot molecules from slow, cold ones. It forcefully decreases entropy inside a closed system, defying the natural order. When you suddenly decide to organize your living room, your brain acts as a localized Maxwell's demon. By expending kinetic energy to vacuum a rug or fold laundry into perfect squares, you forcefully lower the entropy inside your microscopic domain. This provides a massive neurobiological reward, creating the sudden, intoxicating illusion of absolute control over a tiny pocket of chaos. Which is, objectively, an incredible amount of physics to apply to a Wednesday night when you are exhausted. But you know how this goes. I keep coming back to research from the Center on Everyday Lives and Families. Evidence indicates that managing large amounts of physical possessions is directly linked to increased stress hormones, leaving the nervous system stuck in a chronic fight-or-flight alarm state. Decluttering stops being an aesthetic choice. It becomes a behavioral tool to regulate those hormones and rebuild a safe harbor. This pattern was built by necessity. The unpredictable environment demanded a coping mechanism, and you built one. The external threat may have passed for the evening, but the mechanism is still running. There is a shadow side to this mechanism. Think about the 2 a.m. deep clean, the frantic scrubbing of baseboards when the house is entirely silent. Your partner is asleep. You are wiping down the grout until your shoulders ache. You are matching the corners of the towels perfectly. The email from your boss is still unread, glowing on the counter. Why does folding laundry suddenly feel like a matter of life and death? The body is a closed thermodynamic system. When flooded with unbearable internal anxiety, unresolved grief, or modern stress, the nervous system threatens to overheat. Frantic, obsessive cleaning often isn't about hygiene. Think of it as kinetic heat dissipation. You might be converting agonizing psychological heat into physical labor. You use scrubbing a floor as a literal exhaust valve, so your mind does not melt down in the silence of the night. because sometimes it is infinitely easier to clean a kitchen until you are physically exhausted than to sit quietly and face whatever is eating you alive inside. But that is not actually the part that matters. If we stop at the idea that you are just avoiding your feelings, we miss the underlying physics. You aren't just dissipating heat. You are doing it to prove to yourself that you still have jurisdiction over your own life. When your career, the economy, and your future feel entirely out of your hands, a perfectly aligned living room is not an escape. It is a monument to your remaining competence. You are terrified that if you let the physical space fall into chaos, you will have to admit you are no longer the author of your story. I have thought about why this particular realization hits so hard. The closest I have come is this. A paper out of the Princeton University Neuroscience Institute reframed this entirely. Research suggests visual clutter constantly competes for your attention, physically tiring out your cognitive functions. The objects in your visual field are data. It is data your brain must either actively process or actively ignore. That takes energy. Visual clutter acts as thermodynamic friction on your visual cortex. Every piece of unopened mail or stray coffee cup acts as an open background application draining your working memory. Yale University studies found something close to this, indicating messy workspaces slow task completion by 10%, while actively decluttering boosts productivity by up to 77%. When you look at a pile of mail, your brain doesn't just see paper. It sees unmade decisions. It sees friction. By clearing the surfaces, you achieve laminar flow, a state of zero friction where cognitive capacity is freed. You eliminate the visual drag. You give an exhausted nervous system a moment to reset, allowing your mind to finally think and exist without neurological resistance. When we minimize the need for a spotless house as a neurotic quirk, we miss the reality of what is happening. The $23 billion cleaning product industry isn't selling you soap. They are selling you a neurobiological override switch. When you spend 3 hours scrubbing instead of answering critical emails, you aren't procrastinating. You are executing a highly calculated defense mechanism against chaos. You did not choose the macroeconomic chaos building this reflex. The shifting variables and relentless demands were handed to you by a world that refuses to slow down. But you are the one who can notice the mechanism when you finally sit down. Part of you already knows the difference between then and now. That knowing is where movement starts. Tonight, pick one single surface, a nightstand, a kitchen island, clear it completely. Run your hand over the empty wood. Respect the strict boundary of your closed system. Unapologetically enforce your pristine environment. If you recognize this pattern in yourself or someone you share a home with, you don't necessarily need to fix it tonight. Just noticing it is enough. Mastering your environment is the first step, but eventually, the cleaning stops. You are left sitting alone in that perfectly clean room. If the mechanism stopped tomorrow, without effort, without decision, what would you actually have to feel? The room is clean. The mechanism is still running.